I'm Michael Montero with Boxing Monthly, and this is the Neutral Corner for the week of October 10th. So I'm filming this on Tuesday, and literally I was just watching, as I was setting up here, the PBC card. They're having these Tuesday night weekly cards, and Jose Uzcategui just knocked out Julius Jackson, undefeated prospect. Second round knockout, knocked him down 4 times. They're showing the replay. It's pretty bad. Jackson, man, he just did not bring his hands back up. He just he'd punch and come back like this, and it's way out there. He got dropped with a couple right hands, a couple left hooks, couldn't recover. So back to the drawing board for undefeated Julius Jackson. But anyway, that was just an unexpected little tidbit. Let's get into the ring walk. So this week's question comes from Anonymous, and it reads, Mike, I saw your Matthysse Postol ringside recap, but I don't believe those punch numbers. What are your thoughts on CompuBox? Can it be trusted? And how does CompuBox work anyway? Good question, man. This is something that, a lot of boxing fans argue about. For the most part, I think CompuBox does a good job. They're fairly accurate, but I don't think anyone should ever take CompuBox or any other punch stats that you see as gospel. They can give an indication about trends you're seeing in a fight, but the punch numbers, they're calculated by humans, and humans make errors, right? And boxers are so fast. It's not like MMA where the action is a lot slower. Boxers are fast. Even guys in boxing that we call slow are much faster than martial artists and other martial arts. So seeing all the punches, it gets difficult. But real quick, the way it works, there's 2 operators for each fight, and one will have the fighter in the blue corner, one will have the fighter in the red corner. And they have like a pad that's like 4 keys. And they hit a button for a jab thrown but missed, a jab thrown that's connected, and then they have another one for a power punch missed, power punch connected. So they're constantly pressing those buttons, and then, as I understand it, there's an alt key that they can press for a body punch. And that's pretty much what they do. It's all computerized. It immediately goes into a database. And CompuBox is like about 30 years old. They've improved the database as they've gone along. The cool thing about the database they have is they have 30 years worth of data. And they have everything broken down by like the minute of the round. So they can tell you if a fighter is slow during the first 2 minutes of a round, but then throws a lot of punches in the last minute, or if they're a front runner. They can give you averages for each division. Like the junior welterweight average punches thrown per round, and they can measure a particular fighter against those averages. So it's cool that they have this database and everything, but I think they could do better with the key system. I think maybe they could vary up the punches better. Instead of having a 4-key system, maybe they could have it expand to where, because right now basically it's jabs and everything else is a power punch. The thing is, not every power punch is created equal, right? And not every jab's created equal. So I do know this, they're not supposed to count measuring jabs. You'll see some fighters like Guillermo Rigondeaux, he'll just stand there and do this the whole round sometimes, right? They don't count that. They're not supposed to. They're only supposed to count a jab that's thrown with the intent to land. But yeah, it'd be cool if they had an uppercut key, a straight right, a hook, so that they diversified the punch numbers a little bit. I think that's something maybe they can incorporate. But all in all, they've done independent studies, supposedly, and 90+% of the time, whoever throws and lands more punches overall wins when it goes to the cards. And if you land over 50% of your power punches, you win over 90% of the time if it goes to the cards. So, I don't know. It's right probably 90% of the time, and then there's other times where it's not right. But overall, I like CompuBox as an indication to how a fight went. You might look at punch stats like, let's take Canelo Lara, right? Canelo threw more body shots, I think the power punching was even in terms of shots landed. Lara won the battle of the jab. So when you can look at those stats and you can say, well, what do you prefer? The guy that controlled distance with his jab or the guy that landed the harder power punches? But then if you don't know anything about Erislandy Lara and Canelo Alvarez, and you see that they both landed about the same amount of power punches, you might think, oh, well, maybe Lara wins because he landed more jabs. But if you know something about the fighters, you know Canelo hits much harder, so he should maybe get the benefit of the doubt in those close rounds. So, like I said, it's not all punches are created equal. So it gives an indication, but you gotta know something about the fighters and what's going on to score a close fight like Canelo Lara. I hope that answered your question and didn't confuse you more. But guys, if you have any questions, man, tweet me, Montero Unboxing. You can ask me questions on YouTube, on any of my videos. If you make a comment and just say, hey man, I don't want you to give my name out or something like that, if you want to stay anonymous. But if you do, just say, hey man, please give me a shout out on my Twitter page or whatever it is. Or you could just email me at monterounboxing@gmail.com. But for now, let's get into the review and analysis of last week's action. So HBO and Showtime had dueling cards last Saturday. Let's start with the card in Cincinnati. That was the Showtime card. And I thought it was a decent card. And sadly, it was probably one of the better cards Showtime has had this year. So, I'm not trying to beat up on Showtime, but they've had a rough year. And I don't know how they save face going forward now that their cash cow is supposedly retired. But Adrien Broner fought in a title fight, a fight that shouldn't have been a title fight, but it was, against Khabib Allakhverdiev. And, Broner's from Cincinnati. The fight was in Cincinnati. It was a pretty friendly crowd for him. A good, decent crowd showed up. And what can I say? Adrien Broner, in that main event, he looked good. He won every round. He dominated. But it was against a guy who was pretty limited and pretty much tailor-made for Broner, right? To Broner's credit, he came in at his lowest weight, his lowest weight in several years. So it looks like he's rededicated himself to the sport and getting more mature, at least as an athlete. I don't know necessarily about the guy, he's still kind of out there, but as an athlete, it seems he's matured a little bit for right now. And he's absolutely a top 5 fighter at 140 pounds. Now in the co-feature, Jose Pedraza got a split decision over Edner Cherry. He defended his belt. There was 2 scores, 117-111 for Pedraza. One score was 116-112 for Edner Cherry. All 3 of those scores are horrible. You know what? I'm gonna swear. It's my channel. All 3 of those scores were fucking horrible. All 3 of them. This was a very, very close fight. And I don't mind Pedraza winning. I could see if somebody had Edner Cherry winning. I thought Pedraza did just a little bit more, right? But neither of these guys, neither of them won more than 7 rounds. It was a very, very close fight. It scares me when I see 3 completely opposite cards like that. It just makes me wonder who the hell was judging that. What the hell were they seeing? What's even crazier is the 2 judges that scored it for Pedraza, they agreed. They had it, 9 rounds to 3. What were they watching and how could they agree? It makes, the conspiracy theorists out there, and there's plenty of them out there because you guys message me all the time about this stuff. When you got 2 judges giving 9 rounds, having the exact same score in such a close fight like that, those conspiracy theory guys will say, hey man, it was in the bag for Pedraza all along. Some of you out there were saying that Pedraza got exposed in this fight. I don't agree with that. Edner Cherry is a very, very tough guy to look really good against. This is the kind of fight that, Pedraza hopefully can learn from. He got through it. I don't necessarily love the decision, but again, I think he did just enough to win. Edner Cherry is one of those guys that does just enough to give you a really tough fight and lose. He's one of those guys. After the decision, Edner Cherry didn't even really complain about the stoppage because I remember the Showtime commentator, the name's slipping me right now. I can't think of his name, but he asked Cherry about the decision. He goes, that's why you don't leave it up to the judges. What can you do? You know, he was kind of nonchalant about it, so even he wasn't that upset about it. But that was the Cincinnati card. Here on this side of the United States in Los Angeles, I was ringside for the Matthysse Postol card. This was a very, very entertaining card on HBO, which again, I'll repeat, is having a fantastic year. And the Iceman cometh. Victor Postol scores the upset. Although, now that we look back, it really shouldn't have been an upset. He gets a 10th round KO over Lucas Matthysse to win a vacant 140-pound title. Look, you know, I trashed the Broner Allakhverdiev card for being for a vacant title. This fight was also for a vacant title in the same division, but I will say it had a little more credibility because Matthysse has been one of the top guys in the division for years. He's consistently fought the best. He had a good fight against Provodnikov earlier this year, who's another top guy. So, you know, this vacant title, it's still a paper title in my opinion, but it's a thicker stock of paper. How about that? But Postol, look, he frustrated Matthysse early on. Matthysse was trying to just use his aggression and get inside. He was much, much shorter, but the much harder hitter. Anytime he hit Postol, he pushed Postol around. And I thought this was a very, very close fight halfway through. Some people out there are saying that Postol dominated, but again, it comes down to whose punches do you like better? Postol's controlling range and distance and the jab, or do you like Matthysse landing 2 or 3 really good shots around that moved Postol 3, 4, 5 feet back? Plus, there was a lot of holding on Postol's part, a lot of rabbit punching on Lucas Matthyse's part. So those first 6 rounds I thought were very, very close. And I think I had the fight split 3 rounds apiece at that point. I thought in the 6th and 7th round, Matthysse had his last big push. He looked frustrated because of Postol's moving and holding and everything. And he gave one last push and he nailed Postol with some hard shots. I think toward the end of the 6th round and the beginning of the 7th round. And I saw Postol's legs wobble a little bit, but the Ukrainian hung tough. He got through it. And he actually came out in the 8th round and looked like he was dominating suddenly. And that's when it became very, very clear that Matthysse was a mentally and emotionally beat fighter. And from that point on, the writing was on the wall. Postol just kept moving him, turning him, getting off with combinations, moving him, turning him. Anytime Matthysse got close, Postol would clinch him, hold him. And, you know, the last couple rounds of the fight, there wasn't much clinching anymore because Matthysse was exhausted and he just had that look on his face of just being over, just done mentally. And it was a short counter right hand that dropped Matthysse on all fours. He fell forward in the 10th round, and it landed right on his eye. I mean, just when you see the replay, you'll see, look, bam, right in his eye. And immediately he winced, he was grabbing his eye, he went down. He was hurt, but he could have got up. I mean, it was very, very clear, and he admitted that after the fight. He didn't want to get up. He blamed it on his eye. He said he was protecting his eye, but you know, he just looked like a mentally defeated fighter. A lot of you out there are bashing Matthysse, calling him a quitter, saying, you know, he's a chump and all this kind of stuff. Look, that's not fair. This guy has been in numerous fight of the year candidates. He's been a warrior, man. He fought with a really bad eye against Danny Garcia. You remember he was injured. He fought Provodnikov and guys like that, guys that other fighters avoid. So give Matthysse a pass, okay? He's been in some tough, tough wars. His last 2 fights before coming into this fight were tough fights for him. So give the dude a pass. He hung tough to the 10th round. It didn't work out. Why go through 2 more rounds of unnecessary punishment when you know there's no way you're gonna win the fight? I think that was his mindset. You know, that's it. For him, he's done at the top level. He looked pretty much finished. If Marcos Maidana can get down in weight to at least 147, maybe a Maidana-Matthysse fight in Argentina could be a great cash-out fight for him. But I don't know if Marcos Maidana wants to even fight anymore. So for Lucas, you know, maybe it's a farewell fight or a couple more fights, and that's it. But he never did get that world title. And for me, he was one of the best fighters of this last generation to never get a title. For Postol, he goes on to big things from here. I think he's a clear number 2 in the division behind Terrence Bud Crawford. They both fight on HBO. The promotional situation works out for them where they can make that fight happen. I believe next year we'll get a Crawford-Postol fight, and that's going to be a fascinating matchup, man. But in the co-feature, Antonio Orozco wins a unanimous decision over Humberto Soto. And this is one of those fights, I said it in my ringside recap, where you could see Orozco learning on the job, growing in front of our eyes, right? He struggled early on, and Soto was nailing him with some hard shots. He showed a pretty good chin, but I don't want to say he controlled the fight, but he made adjustments halfway through. He worked the body very well, Orozco did, and that slowed Soto down. And he just did more work. He outworked the older fighter. So good performance by him, but it was a close fight. And these scores, 97-92 twice, 98-91. And keep in mind, Orozco had a point deducted for a low blow. So these scorecards here, I mean, this is 8 rounds to 2, 9 rounds to 1. It was not that wide of a fight. So again, I don't love these scores, but the right guy won. And for Orozco, he goes on to learn from here. He's got 10 rounds of footage with a veteran like Humberto Soto to watch with his team, to learn from. And he goes on to big things here. Look, the 140-pound division is really, really heating up. There's a lot of talent and a lot of fights that can be made. The promotional situation, the network situation will allow for some of these better fights to be made. You got Terrence Crawford, Victor Postol, Adrien Broner, Amir Imam, Ruslan Provodnikov, who I believe just made the switch to Showtime, Mauricio Herrera, Lamont Peterson, Jose Benavidez, Orozco. You got guys around at that weight that are going to make some great, great fights. Now, most of those fighters are with Top Rank, Golden Boy, and lined up with HBO. So again, HBO is kind of getting the benefit of all this talent, but there's a lot that's up in the air at 140. There's not one unified champion yet, but if Crawford and Postol fight next year, the winner of that fight is the linear champ at 140 pounds, because I believe they will be the number 1 and number 2 ranked fighters at that time. So this weekend, there's not much boxing action here in the United States, but on the other side of the pond, a couple of UK prospects, undefeated UK prospects, they are facing their toughest challenge to date in their pro careers on a card in Manchester. Headlining that card, Terry Flanagan, who's 28-0, 11 knockouts, coming off a win, a second-round retirement win over Jose Zepeda to win a vacant lightweight title earlier this year. Zepeda had dislocated his shoulder in the second round, retired. Flanagan is going up against his toughest test to date, I think, as a pro, against Diego Magdaleno, who's an American, 28-1. They're both southpaws, and Flanagan's a taller guy. He's 5'9", Diego Magdaleno's 5'6", but Magdaleno comes forward, works the body. He's shown some toughness and some grit, and I think he's absolutely going to push Flanagan in this fight. And in the co-feature, 154-pound fight, Liam Smith, undefeated at 20-0-1, 10 knockouts, goes up against John Thompson, who's 17-1 with 6 knockouts, of New Jersey. And for those of you who maybe heard the name John Thompson but can't quite place him, his claim to fame is he won this year's ESPN Boxino tournament earlier this year when it was still Friday night fights. Remember, they had, I think, a heavyweight Boxino tournament and a junior middleweight one. He won that junior middleweight tournament, so he's got some experience. He's been very active this year. I think he's going to give Liam Smith a very, very good test. We're going to find out just how good Liam Smith is. So this is a pretty interesting card with 2 undefeated prospects facing 2 tough, experienced American opponents. Really, really nice step-up fights for these guys, and we'll see how they look. Next Tuesday night, here in the United States at the Little Creek Casino in Washington State, undefeated American heavyweight Gerald Washington, El Gallo Negro, his nickname, 16-0, 11 KOs. He's going up against his toughest test to date as a professional against Adrien Broner, who's 22-1, 16 knockouts. Mansour, even though he's an older guy, he's much older than Washington, he's still kind of considered a prospect. He's actually, he's 43 years old, just looking at my notes here. Now, the reason why that is because he had no fights between 2001 and 2010 because he was in jail. But he's been fighting for a very, very long time. He beat Dominic Gwynn in 2011, but everyone's beat Dominic Gwynn. I think my grandma could beat Dominic Gwynn right now. But it was a good step-up fight for him at that time, just coming back. His only loss was to Stephen Cunningham last year, and both men were down in that fight, which is interesting. It's Steve Cunningham, who doesn't have much power, was able to drop Adrien Broner. Although I believe it was late in the fight when Cunningham dropped him, and I think Broner was very, very tired. But in 2014, I think his last fight of 2014, he stopped Fred Cassie in the 7th round. Remember, that's the guy who just took Deontay Wilder very, very deep. In the fight before that, he got robbed against Chris Arreola. So that knockout win over Fred Cassie, that looks pretty good, going into this fight against Gerald Washington. Now let's talk about Washington. He fought 5 times in 2013 and 2014. He was very, very busy. This will just be his 2nd fight this year. His trainer, John Pullman, has told me in interviews that they want to slow him down, take more time training and preparing for each fight, and be more methodical about their business. So they are trying to step it up. And this is a good step up in opposition for him. There's a big height difference here. I mentioned before, Washington is 6'5", Mansour is 6 feet tall. But Mansour, punches with that compact, tight type of power shots. He's going to be punching up. He's got that kind of style. And it will be interesting to see what Washington, how he responds to that. But if I had to give a prediction for this fight, I think Gerald's going to come out slow, very, very controlled and measured. I think he probably watched the footage on Mansour, who is a front runner and who gets tired because all the guy does is throw power shots. So I think he'll take his time, work behind the jab, stay on the outside, clinch when he has to, and then towards the middle round start stepping it up. I actually think that Washington can get Mansour out of there. It'd be a shame, be a bit of a letdown if he doesn't. I think it'd make a big, big statement at this stage in Washington's career if he could get Mansour out of there. And if he does, then he really proves he's the best of that PBC heavyweight prospect lot. They have a few guys right now, right? We just saw Dominic Breazeale. There's a couple other guys that Al Heyman has in his universe, these undefeated heavyweights. A lot of them are transfers from other sports, like Washington was a college football player and briefly played pro football. So, he's a very, very good athlete. And I do think that he has the most potential of all those prospects Heyman's bringing up right now, the heavyweight prospects. And a knockout win over Mansour would prove that. It'd kind of be the icing on the cake.